Well, joining us in studio now to help us understand this in greater detail is Arthur Blok, Executive Editor-in-Chief of The Liberian. Good morning, Arthur. Thank you very much. We've had a good chat just before that.
Yeah, we did indeed.
Can we just talk about how you would assess the UN's stance on Syria and what progress could be made here?
Well, a lot of progress has been made in the eyes of the international community, of course. We have Syria, we had a leader who was on the terrorist list, 10 million bounty on his head because of the atrocities he committed. All of a sudden he is the savior of the country, and he is asked basically in his UN resolution to break with his old allies. He has to go after the Islamist jihadist who helped him into power. And if he doesn't, then the United Nations has the right to intervene with force. So it's basically selling out your allies, your buddies. And that's an interesting development. I mean, things move very fast.
Is that safe for him? Is that going to cause problems with the longevity?
Well, we just published an article in the Liberum this morning. There's a lot of these groups that held meetings in the past week, so how do we continue? Because Syria is not under the control of the government yet. It's like these areas with these people, and it's complicated. It reminds me a bit of the Lebanese civil war in the 70s and 80s. You have areas from the country under control of different militias and different groups. So it's a beautiful resolution, but it will take let's say, some effort, that's even understated, to enforce it.
Yeah, so in that sense, what is the long-term impact of the policy that could shift things and how the international community approaches post-conflict transitions today?
In general, in regards to Syria?
In regards to Syria.
Well, if you look carefully at the resolution, you would see that basically it's being divided. So you have Russia will get the coastal regions where the ANEWZ are, and they have a military base for decennia already. The central area will be for the Syrian defense forces, the Syrian army, and then the south, where the Druze live, a large population of Druze, minority, because it falls under control of Israel. So it's a breakup basically of a country. Now, from international dynamic perspective, you could say, well, it makes a country like Saudi Arabia stronger. You have an Arab state, Syria, that used to be quite large, with the backup of the Iranians. Now, Iran collapsed, as we all know. Well, at least their proxies did. And yeah, now Syria is basically broke down in pieces, so it becomes weaker. That's, from a Lebanese perspective, not so bad, because we have been under the tutelage of the Syrians also for decennia.
You say it breaks down into pieces. So
yeah, well, but not on paper. It looks quite nice, but that's what it means basically.
You don't think a stable government humanitarian improvements could materialize following this UN decision?
Well, of course, after such a resolution, that paves the way for money. If he just signs, which he does, of course, and his government, because also his Minister of Interior is being removed from the terror watch list. These guys were militia fighters, so they are not your ordinary soldiers or anything. They came from and they committed the most terrible atrocities on the people. Now they are expected to help the people that they conquered. So we have to see what's going to happen. I'm a bit skeptical, as you can hear, but still hopeful that Syria will normalize the situation, and of course the poverty of the people goes to the roof. It's extreme. We have in Lebanon alone hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees, not to mention the Syrian refugees in Europe, in Germany, the Netherlands, France, name them. Yeah. They're everywhere. And of course, because it was an unlivable situation.
And what do you think is driving the current pace of this political and humanitarian progress on the ground, do you think? Well,
it's a complicated question, but I think the dynamics right now is Trump focusing on the Middle East. We saw that yesterday, 2 days ago, the Saudi Crown Prince was at the White House making huge announcements about massive investments in the US, and Trump profiles himself as the president of peace. Now, I think he invited the Syrian President al-Shara to the White House a few weeks ago to show that, look, I'm even on top of this. Basically, everywhere that I put my hands on, we will have an improvement in the situation. And I think it's a personal thing for Trump. So that means that it's on the top of his agenda. And that's a good thing, because if everybody's watching, then it's easier to improve a situation and the livelihood of people.
the power vacuum that emerged from Syria and Assad, we've had,
Yeah.
is it almost a sense of, okay, we were going to have a replacement, he was always going to be an ex-militar, he was always going to be HCS. Have we found a moderate in al-Sadr that can work with the
But
world?
he is not a moderate. That's the big misconception. He profiles himself now as the moderate president, but he is an Islamist. I mean, it was Al-Qaeda and ISIS, this coalition, basically kicked out Assad, and there was a very awkward weekend. We had, on a Wednesday in Lebanon, signed an agreement with Israel to let's say, stop fighting.
So
and 3 days later,
do you believe
Assad was in Damascus?
Do you believe he could become a moderate?
Well,
he could embody these Western
let's
ideals?
not forget, he's an interim president. He's not there to stay. I think his only role is calming down the situation, normalizing it, and call for new elections. And then if people like him, then he could become the president. But there should be elections. You cannot appoint yourself as being the savior of a country.
No, but it seems like it's likely to happen only because he seems to have very good relations now with President Donald Trump. Yeah. And obviously that was the first time that the Syrian president had gone
it has been a while that there is a good relation between the Syrian president and the American president. Correct.
Exactly. So to see that on the global stage and to see so much, eyes and attention on it will give some kind of, hope that things can be stabilized, people can start living their lives in a better way.
Absolutely. And it's about time, because the people of Syria are suffering for what is it, 14, 15 years now. I mean, don't forget why they rose up against Assad in the first place, because they were also suffering, low wages, poor infrastructure, basically no future hope for the people. And I think there's a good momentum now. Let's give al-Sadr the benefit of the doubt, and let's see what he makes of it.
And just quickly on that, obviously Russia's influence with the previous government there, he's now lost that with this new, with Assad. Do you think that's something that now the US is getting involved, that Russia's influence now is kind of depleting in the Middle East?
In the end, that's the whole purpose of American involvement, to marginalize the Russians. So they have some military bases in the coastal areas, let's say north of Beirut, north of Lebanon. And they are still relatively strong there. I don't really know how strong they are, because, as I said, it took 3 days for Assad to flee to Moscow. He's still there. This is also an unresolved dossier. What's going to happen with Assad? Is he going to be extradited? Does he have to be put in front of an international court? A lot of things are pending. And I think the first step now is to, let's say, more or less try to normalize the situation on the ground, the status quo, and then see if they can improve the life of the people. And then things will follow, hopefully, but there need to be new elections. You cannot have another dictator in place that says, well, I'm now the president, I'm going to stay there for 5 to 10 years until I decide it's the right moment to have election.
Let's draw a little parallel, though. So we see in Ukraine, Zelensky. There's been martial law since the war. He's been president for longer than the term usually states. I'm not going to label anything. We know Donald Trump has previously alluded to the fact that he's a dictator. He said that on social media. But that is because of the martial law. Is Syria not going through the same period where there is no infrastructure, there's no development yet to have fair, good elections yet?
Syria it's not a third world country. I mean, traditionally they had a good infrastructure. There's various level of governing. There's municipality, there's regional. So it's possible, but there needs to be a will to organize it. I mean, I'm not going to comment on Zelensky because I'm not an expert on that dossier, but I think it's not impossible to, first we create stability. We're far from that in Syria. If you've seen the massacres in the coastal regions of the Alawites and St. Druze, that's why this United Nations resolution is so important. So it gives a bit of a framework towards a normalization. And it's just a paper yet, but the threat of this, if it's not implied, then the international community holds the right under Chapter 7 to use force. It's interesting. They're basically saying, if you do not abide by this resolution, we can have an international force in no time ready to help you stabilize the country. And I don't think that's in al-Sadr's interest to have an international force on his ground as of yet.
Well, I want to thank you very much for your insights today. Really interesting. And we'll keep the eyes on the involvements from Syria as well.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Blok. Thank you.